If that were the case, then you should be able to look back and say, okay, well, let's look at the most monitored and surveilled people in history. And arguably, that was the Soviets living under the Soviet Union under Stalin and the folks who came after that. Every phone call could be listened to. Every piece of postal mail could be opened. If you had a party at your house, you wouldn't know if government informants were attending the party listening. After all, if you have nothing to hide, why would you care? But the Soviet Union under Stalin was the most deadly regime in all of history. And in fact, under that regime, with all of that watching, 60 million people perished. 60 million people were killed by their own government, by the very government that was supposed to be protecting them.
The bad guy might today be Al Qaeda, and it might tomorrow be, fundamentalist Baptist.
You take Homeland Security, who issued a report that said those people who own guns, those people who are anti-abortion, those people who are the tax protesters, and all kinds of Americans are really terrorists in waiting. And attempts should be made to silence those people.
The MIAC report, which was the Missouri Information Awareness Center, it was a report put out for law enforcement that was actually leaked into the public sphere. And it was defining potential domestic terrorists. And disturbingly, this MIAC report was listing people who could be your next door neighbor, even you. They were listing people who, anybody who was concerned about constitutional issues, anybody who supported Chuck Baldwin or Ron Paul, anybody who was a libertarian or a constitutionalist. So people with, who weren't just mainstream Republican Democrats. Anyone who was concerned, the part that shocked me, anyone who was concerned about RFID privacy. So that's me. That's what I work on, and I'm certainly not a domestic terrorist. People who were concerned about abortion and issues around that. People who were wanting to defend their Second Amendment rights, which are constitutionally protected. Your right to own and bear arms. All of those people were identified as potential domestic terrorists, and in this report that was going out to law enforcement, they were being told to watch out for us, to look for people who share those characteristics.
How much additional security do you get by having so much less privacy? It is a really fundamental question. And it is always easy to say, I don't care. I want the government to know everything. Just keep the bad guys away, keep the terrorists away. Our history tends to demonstrate that governments repurpose information. They get information for one purpose and they use it for something else. The unchecked surveillance tends in the long run to cost us more than the security that we gain from it.
Well, I'd like to know how they define the bad guy. You see, in Germany, that was true too. The bad guys there were Jews, and they murdered 6 million of them. By whose authority? Well, that's the common good. That was a state decision. The whole concept of master race. All those ideas were given the color of law. You see, the way you persecute people is find out what they do, disparage it, marginalize them, and then pass laws against what they do, and then enforce the laws.
When it came out that the government and the Census Bureau was collecting the GPS coordinates of everyone's front doors, a lot of us said, why would you need that? You have the street address. You clearly know how to find the location, or the census worker couldn't have gotten there in the first place. So why would you need this extra step that's costing an enormous sum of money? The only explanation that could occur to many of us is that they'd want to know the GPS coordinates of your house so that they could target you. And that sounds crazy, but when you look over at what's happening in Pakistan and in Afghanistan, where there are unmanned aerial drones that can literally target a home, we regularly hear about houses that have been blown up by the military. There was a wedding party going on in this house, and then boom, bombs were dropped on it, and it was blown up. So I think there's a real question mark.
Now it becomes a question of whether or not you trust the government. The problem with governments is they're made up of people. If you didn't have people in them, they'd probably be okay. But, as soon as you give a guy a little bit of power, well, that's never quite enough. It becomes his mandate. It's his human natural instinct to accumulate more power.
One of the problems when you create these technologies is it's like putting a noose around your neck. And you may think, well, gosh, it's someone go and destroy, large numbers of people that he just personally decided he didn't like. That capability that he had back in the 1940s, I mean, multiply that exponentially in terms of what could be done today. You could, turn people into non-entities. You wouldn't even have to kill them. You could just make it so they couldn't access the ATM machine, they couldn't go to the grocery store, they couldn't get to see the doctor. So I think the bigger picture and what we need to be thinking of as a society today is we really should not be creating the power to destroy our lives and putting it into anyone's hands. Whether you trust the current administration or not is really irrelevant, because ultimately I believe there will be someone who will come along and who will take advantage of that. They'll remove all the safeguards we put in place, and then we're just going to be sitting ducks.
One of the founding fathers said, those who would trade liberty for security deserve neither.